Thank you for joining us in this third of our series on community and urban gardening. This series is brought to you through grant funding from Natural Resource Conservation and Development Service. Our presenter today, Greg Lolley, truly believes in conservation. He believes in working with nature and not against nature, and he believes, just like most of us, it's better to work smarter and not harder.
Hi, I'm James Curtin with the Natural Resource Conservation Service ACES program. The Natural Resource Conservation Service is an agency created through USDA to assist farmers, ranchers, and growers with conservation activity on their land and property. The ACES program was created to assist Natural Resource Conservation Service with delivery of their programs and activities through older workers' career centers. The Natural Resource Conservation Service provides funding and assistance to assist landowners with conservation activities such as fencing, cross fencing, watering trough, livestock, anything to do with livestock. Also, they provide funding to do with small growers on activities such as tunnel houses, garden, community type garden, and they also provide funding. They also help large growers with conservation practice such as cotton, corn, and peanut. With the William B. Adams School to discuss and talk about different aspects of what NRCS does. We also provide education, training to also help producers become more familiar and more productive in the way that they carry on their business. And whether you're just getting started up or you've been farming for the last 20 years, we try to assist you and make your operation better.
Good morning to all you fellow gardeners out there. We're coming to you this morning from my farm. My name is Greg Lolley, and my wife and I own this piece of property. We got here in 2011, and we really didn't start in earnest gardening until probably around 2016. I was about to retire and wondering what I was going to do when I retired, so I've actually gone and I work more now than I did when I retired. But what we're trying to do here is we're trying to work more with nature. We're trying to take less of it off of us as far as labor and farming and growing our garden and those types of things, and trying to grow as much as we possibly can, and with the least amount of inputs and labor, and just trying to look at this piece of property as a holistic manner so that we can try to work within these rules of nature that are going on here in this area. As you might know, pretty much every other organism in the world on this earth all comply with all the rules and the regulations of nature. In other words, they don't try to break the rules. We are the only ones that actually don't follow the rules. So we try to enforce our will, or impose our will on what's going on in nature, and never even taking into consideration what the processes that are already set in place that have been here for millennia, that have been proven to work. If you just look out into nature, you can find many different examples of the way nature does things. And if we can do that and follow those examples that we have, that nature has done here for us, and follow some of those kinds of rules and cooperate with nature, we can grow things in a much more economical way. We can grow them in a more easier way as far as labor, and but it requires some thought. In other words, the hardest thing we'll ever do in trying to do this type of gardening is I've always heard the hardest ground is in between your ears. And so it requires a little bit of a difference in the way that you think about things. but it's not really hard once you start seeing these differences and seeing these processes that are going on your property, and try to work with those and not against all of it. So, oh, it's getting a little windy here. But anyway, I'm going to show you a few things today, and I've got some top things that I would think that would be some of the best things for us to think about as we're beginning to do container gardening or some kind of farming. They're just things that we need to keep in mind. So when you begin to think about your raised bed garden or any kind of garden, whether you're gardening in the ground or in a raised bed or something like that, you want to think of your whole property or area there where you're attempting to grow in a holistic manner. So what that means is that everything that happens in one area can affect the other, and each one has a cause and effect. So we need to keep that in mind, that if we do something over here in this area, what will that have an effect on this area over here? Or if I do something in this area, how will that affect the birds? How will that affect the insects? How the pollinators? All those kinds of things that are very, very important. So we want to think of it as a holistic way of thinking, and so that way we can take into consideration all these different things that might happen when we do a specific action, whether it's in our bed or garden or whatever. One of the biggest things is ecology, and ecology means the relationships in between the plants themselves in the area that they're in. And sometimes that area can be further than we could ever even dream of, that it could have an effect, because there's biology that's going on in the soil that actually is almost like an internet under the ground. So these plants can actually talk to each other, and they can have an effect of each other. And so maybe some plant on the other side of the garden may get attacked by a pest. Well, guess what? They can actually convey that information through different channels over to another plant that's on the other side of the garden, and it would kick in and start producing a metabolite or something that would deter that pest from attacking its own leaves or whatever, or fruit. So these relationships, the ecology is a very, very important part of thinking about whenever you're trying to plan your garden, or when you're thinking of where to put plants and how to put plants and those types of things. So we want to be able to work with these symbiotic relationships. Sometimes a relationship can be bad. It can be antagonistic to another plant. So you would not want to plant that plant near specific plants, say. And then there's some plants that they really, really are benefited by being planted next to another plant that's nearby. So these types of things that we can think about as we're thinking about our garden and planning our garden and planting our garden, that will make a profound effect on our results and the way our garden looks and the way our garden functions to produce the food and medicine that we want. I would say my top thing that I would tell anybody who was about to start a garden or about to plant a new garden in the ground or a raised bed would be to plant the things that you would use the most, the nearest to your path during the day. In other words, we don't want to plant our garden in the back 40, because we're not going to see what's going on in the back 40 unless we make a special attempt to go down there or over there, wherever it is. We all have busy lives, and we're always being pulled in different directions. So if we can plant our garden nearby, so that let's just say for instance herbs. So say you have an herb bed. It looks like to me the best place to have an herb bed is right outside your back door. So if you've got the sun available and you've got the means to do it, those herbs and those type of things, plants that we're going to use more often, should be the closest ones to our traffic areas. So a herb garden would be a very, very special one that would be near the back door or near the kitchen, because you could just take, and if you needed some basil, or if you needed some thyme or oregano or something like that in your recipe that you're cooking that day, you can just pop out that back door, break off a few of those leaves or whatever, and bring them in and do your cooking. And you've got the most precious herbs that you could ever possibly have. But if you have to walk 200 yards to get to them, you're probably not going to do it. You're going to reach up in the cabinet and get that one that's been dried, and you're going to get that one that's already prepared, and it's not going to taste as good, it's not going to have as much nutritional value, but that's going to be the easiest way for you to get that done in your recipe. So if it's right outside the back door, you can rationalize stopping and going out that back door and getting it a whole lot better than you can 100 yards away. My second suggestion for planting your garden or planting your garden and thinking about your garden is to be able to think about the movement of the sun during the day, because here in South Alabama we don't really need a whole day's worth of sun, like 14 hours of intense, back-breaking sun every day, and these plants, they don't really need it either. So most vegetables that you'll come across will be fine from 4 to 6 hours of good sunlight a day. So what I would suggest whenever you're thinking about placement of your beds is you would place your beds where they would receive 4 to 6 hours of sun, preferably in the morning. But now sometimes that intense morning sun can be just as harmful as that western setting sun in the afternoon. But so I try to have a little bit on both sides. So I'll try to plant all my rows and orient my beds mostly north-south, so that if I have something in the wintertime, the sun is lower in the horizon during the summertime or in the wintertime. So if you orient your beds north-south, then as that sun moves across in the south sky, lower in the south sky, then your plants are going to be able to get a lot more sun than they would if they were planted east-west and they were being shaded by something. So plant your beds north-south if you can. If you can't, it's not a game stopper or whatever, but it just would be better in the wintertime to have a southern exposure that you can have open to the south, and that you would place your beds in a north-south way, and then that would give you a little bit more sun in the wintertime. And a lot of times you can take and plant taller, more leafy plants, and then put something lower in there, and if you do it that way, then you can actually get sun to those plants too when they need it, and then they'll get the shade when they need it also. Some of those plants that I'm talking about using like that under other taller plants, like I say a pepper or something like that, would be something like arugula. It could be a lettuce, maybe cilantro. Cilantro doesn't like the real hot summer, so it would have to be a shoulder vegetable, so to speak, in the fall and then in the early spring. But those type of plants, a spinach even, also a shoulder type plant that would be in the fall or the spring, doesn't really like that hot summer sun, and is actually harder to get to germinate. I'll give you a little tip here that sometimes I take my trays whenever I'm seeding my spinach, is actually put them in a refrigerated area. If you don't have a walk-in fridge or something like that, then you put them in a real cool room or whatever in the house for 24 hours to give them that little bit of a coolness there, because they really don't like our hot nights. But now here lately we haven't really had that problem. What I've had problems with is actually getting stuff to germinate because it is so cool at night. So the lettuce and the spinach and things like that, we can still be germinating those right now and get those in the garden. Generally we try to germinate most of our stuff in trays, like say a 10-20 tray with about 72 holes in it. Is generally a pretty good size to use, that you can get them up to maybe 4 inches or whatever in the tray before you ever actually have to put them out. It gives them a pretty good head start. So majority of the vegetables that we plant, we do use those trays, and we do seed them in and make seedlings out of them, and then we plant the seedlings. So that might be a tip that might help you with some of your cooler germination seeds. Another thing that I would like to point out and bring to you is the fact that if you have something that's going to be on a trellis or a tall plant that is going to have a lot of shade, generally the better way to approach that is to have that plant on the western side of whatever bed it is excuse me, that you're using, so that as that western sun gets lower in the sky, it gets more intense. It seems like at 5 o'clock in the afternoon it's extremely intense, and so that's when a lot of plants are doing a majority of their transpiring of the water intake, is just to keep themselves from burning completely up. So if you have a trellis, or if you have some structure that is on the western side, then you can plant these plants that are a little bit less tolerant to this evening sun that we have. Plant them on that side, and that'll give them a little bit of relief. And you have to think about it too, as the plant gets bigger, what size is it actually going to be whenever it matures, and then that way you can use that in conjunction with maybe on a bed where you would have on the western side, you would have a tall plant like a pepper or a tomato or something like that, and then you can have some tender plants on the other side that didn't really require that much of that full sun every day. Another big thing we need to think about whenever we're doing our container gardening and our gardening in general is that to use companion planting. And I'm sure you probably have all heard about the three sisters, the corn and the beans, and those relationships that those have, the legumes being the nitrogen producers. But there's a lot of other different kinds of companion planting that can be done, and I've talked to Susan, and she's going to make available a article that came from Mother Earth News. That's what it was, and it's been many years ago, but I've had it for a long time, and I go back to it all the time because it actually lists those things that you would want plant things with, and things that you would want to avoid planting together. So it's a good document that you can refer to all along. One of the things that we've found is that if you plant lettuce and put radishes near lettuce, which is a lot of things, that's a lot of what I do, is I always put radishes around the edge of things so that I can utilize that space. If I have a larger plant planted there, then I can use those radishes because they'll be off in the summertime, in like 20 days or so. And so you get a real fast crop there. But if you plant them near the lettuce, a lot of times radishes will get real woody and have a hard pith in the middle in the summertime. But if you plant them near lettuce, they'll actually make them taste better. So you won't have quite the woodiness that you would have. And there's another one. It's dill. Dill planted near cabbage. Dill planted near cabbage can make the cabbage taste better. So those are just a couple of things that you can think about And also, if you would like to download that document, or you can even find it online if you did a search on Mother Earth News and Companion Planting Guide. I'm sure you'd find it on Google or whatever search engine you use. But that's another thing we need to think about whenever we're doing our gardening, is those companion plants. And it all fits right into that where I was talking about earlier about the holistic way of looking at your garden, is that everything you do in that garden and where you plant it and how you do that is going to have an effect on every other thing in that garden. Here's another bed with some teddy bear sunflowers, and also we have some young jewels of opar again that we can use for salad. The teddy bear sunflowers are more just for fun, and then we have calendula that's growing there in the middle, so some more flowers. So you always want to keep a few flowers around to just give yourself a beautiful look to your bed. Well, I hope you've gotten something out of this talk this morning. I wanted to bring those things to you. I want to say a thank you to the NRCS for providing this, and VB Adams and Susan Owens for putting this together and making this content available to us for training and to help us. I also would like to mention the Alabama Cooperative Extension Service, and that they have an app that you can download called Farming Basics, and it is available free of charge. You would just need to go to the extension website and download that. They have it for iOS and for Android, so you can put it on your smartphone. And so one of the big things that it does is it has pretty much all the normal crops that we grow here in Alabama, and when you should plant them, when should you harvest them, and how can you expect what harvest would be, what date, and those kinds of things. It has things about the pest and what pests you might see, and gives you pictures, and actually has a way you can use your camera and you can take a picture of a pest or a problem that you're having on your plant and actually send that message through the app to your local horticulture agent or your county extension agent. So that's a real advantage to be able to do that and call on these people to help you, because that's what they're there for. They want to help us be able to grow our food and to help us do that. There's also a course that you can take if you want to go a little bit deeper into farming. There's a course that the Extension Service has. It's a farming course that I think it takes about 8 hours or something like that to go through it. But it's a good one. It's not just for farmers. It's good for gardeners too. And I tell everybody that we should all be utilizing these tools and things that we have. The Extension Service also has a Q&A on Friday that Dr. Ayanaba Majumdar, he's the entomologist at Auburn that is over the vegetable arena and the row crop arena. So he has a Q&A on Friday. They have virtual farm tours on Thursday afternoons that are real informative, and you can see what's going on in the state of Alabama as far as farming and gardening. So those are just a few things that that the Extension Service and NRCS and VBB Adams have all helped us with. And we also here on My Farm, we have a Facebook group, we have a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and we're pretty strong on those. And we have a Facebook group that we talk about growing, that you're welcome to join, doesn't cost a thing. And I talk about things like we're talking about right now. We have a YouTube channel where we do a lot of talks about medicine and making medicines and wild plants out in the woods. So those are some things that you can utilize to help you. And I also do consultations for gardens and farms. So if you ever need any help and you want to reach out, I'll be glad to talk to you. And hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you later.